The human body has 24 ribs. Drew Brees broke 11 of his. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and this is your #1 source for learning about the unique medical side of the world of sports. It's Saturday evening, and we just got an update from Ed Werder saying he talked with Drew Brees, and the doctors actually found 6 more rib fractures, bringing the grand total to 11. Yes, 11 rib fractures for the NFL quarterback. Brees said too that everything's looking good in terms of how he's healing from his collapsed lung and rib fractures, and is even hopeful he'll be able to play in week 14. Let's talk a little bit about these updates. Apparently for Brees, 8 of his fractures are on the left side and 3 of them are on the right, which makes this even more crazy. Remember, there's only 12 ribs on that left side, so the fact that he has fractures in 8 of them, Drew Brees took an absolute beating. What's even more surprising about this is that means that he's fractured some of the ribs that are much harder to break. If you recall, ribs 1, 2, and 3 in particular are pretty hard to break just because of their size, the location they are on their body. Similarly, all the way down at the bottom here, ribs 11 and 12 are these 2 floating ribs in the back that, again, aren't really attached to anything in the front, and so those 2 are really hard to break as well. But if we get rid of those 5 ribs, that means that he broke one of these more difficult to break ribs. Just counting down here, I mean, it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's like practically his whole chest. It's a little more typical to think how he has 3 on the right side. Usually if ribs are gonna break, it's not just a single rib that takes the load of that blunt trauma. It's gonna be multiple, so that's not as surprising. You may be wondering, why didn't they pick up all these rib fractures initially? Well, first off, rib fractures are really hard to see always on X-ray. By some estimates, they can be missed 50% of the time. So if you have a high suspicion for rib fractures, you need to do some advanced imaging that's much better at looking at the actual bones. Classically, a CT scan is going to be the choice for really getting good detail of the bones. MRIs are also going to be used, but the MRIs are going to be in particular better at things like muscles, nerves, those soft tissues. If the rib fractures are so mild that you have to do additional advanced tests to pick them up, probably a good sign that they're not as severe. Certainly that they're not these crazy displaced out of alignment types of injuries. There's one other little nuance here in the reporting that could be playing a difference in this. Our ribs don't attach directly onto the bones in the front of the chest. We have this connection called the costal cartilage, or the chondral cartilage, that basically spans between the rib and the sternum. You can have a fracture of this costal cartilage, similarly to how you can have a fracture of the bone. You can also have a rib dislocation where the rib and that cartilage contact gets separated and injured. These costal cartilage fractures are going to be difficult to see on X-ray specifically, and so it's possible that those are more the location of where Brees had his injury, and they're still technically calling them rib fractures because, let's be honest, sometimes there's just some jargon lost in the medical communication. Either way, though, the fact that there are 8 separate levels involved on his left side and 3 on the right tells you just how much of a pounding Drew Brees has taken over the recent weeks. The last update we got here is that his pneumothorax, or his collapsed lung, seems to be progressing pretty well. There's been no indication that Drew Brees required a chest tube or any sort of procedure to remove the air that had accumulated inside his chest, so that's definitely a good thing. In a straightforward, simple pneumothorax, we'll describe the severity based on the percentage of the lung that's collapsed or shrunk down. There are plenty of cases where somebody has something minor called an apical pneumothorax, where it's literally just the very top portion of the lung that's collapsed down, to where it's just like 5, 10, 15% of the entire lung space that's missing. If Brees would have had a substantial collapse of his lung, he would have needed a chest tube, he would have needed some kind of intervention that we probably would have heard about. But if that collapse is small enough, that means there's not that much air inside the chest cavity, and the body is able to resorb that air on its own over time while the lung heals up and the lung is able to re-expand. The big question on everyone's mind is, when can Brees come back? And this is where it's a little bit of a gray area, particularly with the collapsed lung. There's no clear consensus guidelines across sports medicine of exactly when at a week time point to return somebody from a collapsed lung. What is agreed upon, though, is that you have to have radiographic resolution, meaning on X-ray, on CT scan, the lung has completely re-expanded. But assuming that's happened and you're able to pass all of your kind of cardiopulmonary testing, you're able to take deep breaths without any pain, and you're able to move side to side, bend laterally, without having symptoms, usually people are allowed to return. But this can be anywhere from 2 weeks to up to 10+ weeks that we've seen in previous cases. But then in regards to the rib fractures, typically any fractured bone is going to take somewhere on the order of like 4 to 6 weeks or so to really start to heal. But you don't have to sit out until the bone is completely 100% healed. Usually with rib fractures, once the athlete is pain-free and is able to take deep breaths and move and twist and do what they need to do without pain, they'll get back onto the field. They're gonna need to wear some sort of protective padding or flak jacket though to protect that rib to allow it to keep healing, but it's not like you have to sit out that whole month to 2 time period until the rib 100% heals. Now, of course, the problem is if you have 11 rib fractures like Drew Brees, you've got more fractures that need to heal, you've got more sources of pain, and so it's gonna be a longer process. It's not really about toughness here for Brees because you can't really hide if you have pain when you're playing, and having pain is what's gonna keep him out. Yeah, they can do things like nerve blocks to try to reduce and limit some of that pain, but when you're dealing with an underlying injury, you don't want the athlete to be so guarded that they put themselves at risk of getting hurt more. That's it for the video though, everybody. Thank you as always for watching. Let me know any questions or comments down below, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.